So Atma Namaste, welcome. We are on the study of Master Choa's Golden Lotus Sutra, Experiencing Being, and we were on page 17. Now, before we move forward, I just wanted to go back a little bit. Because I was reading Master Choa's book on achieving oneness with the higher soul. And some time back, we had talked about rooting. You remember on page 7, in this book, page 7, in one of the sutras, we had talked about rooting. Yes. And I found an interesting portion on page 158 of this book. So, if you have this book, please do read it, and I hope it gives you a deeper insight. If you remember, when we talked about rooting, I had explained that this is Master Choa's way of making us practical or rooted in the world, so that we don't just fly up and we lose touch with reality, but that we are also practicing spirituality and also being practical and being successful at the material life. So for that, this book I would recommend page 158 on the Achieving Oneness with the Higher Soul book. All right, so let's resume our study. We were on page 17. We had done the first two sutras. Just one or two things more about sutra number 2. If you remember, we spent a lot of time discussing this last time, and I was saying that this is a very, very important sutra. So, where Master is talking about you must flow like water. So, flow like water means you must flow with the situation. You see, sometimes or most of the times, we try to control situations. Now, here, Master is saying when you flow with it, to some extent, you don't try to control. You leave it to God, you leave it to the higher beings, you leave it to the Guru. Now, what that also means is that before you start something, do an invocation. And after that task or that job is over, give thanks. To whom? Invoke to whom? To God, to the higher beings, to the Guru, and give thanks afterwards. And so then you will find that it is easier for you to trust them and let go. Yeah. And you see, letting go, another aspect of letting go is detachment or detachment. So Master Choa has told us that the practical way of practicing detachment is to attach and detach, attach and detach. You must get involved in whatever work you're doing. Now, when that work is done, what you had to do is done, you need to detach. For example, when you do healing, the seventh, you remember there are 7 basic techniques of healing. The 7th one is also very, very, very important. What is the 7th one? The 7th one is to release the energy. And how do you release the energy? By detaching, by cutting the link. Yeah. So, it's a good question how to find the balance between going with the flow and being passive. Going with the flow, to my mind, it is related to being attached to the results. So, when you have to work, you do your best. But when it comes to expecting the result, or then you have to practice, you have to detach. I have done what I had. For example, in healing, I have done. When you're doing the healing, do it to the best you can. But after that, you need to detach. If you do not detach, if you do not cut the link after healing, sometimes you will find the healing is not as effective as it could have been. I I hope you have experienced that already. Okay, let's move forward. If your finger has never been put into the flame, you don't know that it will burn. So, better to have the finger burned rather than the whole body burned. Interesting. It is part of the growing up process. So again, this is related to the first sutra on this page, where Master said that if you are not used to the ups and downs of life, then you don't have immunity. You must be exposed to, the problems of life. Now, what Master is telling us is that life needs to be experienced. Through life experiences, we understand the laws of the world. We understand the laws of the physical world. We understand the laws of the inner world. The cause and effect relation. You do this happens. You do this happens. So, what Master is not telling us that we should go around burning fingers, but what he is telling us is that if you have burnt a finger by touching a hot stove, then you know that you should not go and sit on it. You know? Or if there was a fire and you burnt something very small, then at least that should teach you the lesson that this is to be avoided. So, exposure in a protective way prepares us for the bigger challenges and dangers. That's the purpose of these vaccines. The proper vaccine, it is supposed to expose germs in your system in a limited dose so that your body can develop immunity. Now, you can also get knowledge from books, but when you experience that, when you go through that experience, the chances are you are never going to forget. It is more likely to become more permanent. Master Choa was very good at it. If you see his videos that are given on Full Moon, many times he talks about something, then he will invite a subject and he will make people scan and say, now see what is happening, now see what is happening. Because once the entire class has scanned and seen what is the change, you are less likely to forget. I was fortunate once, Master Choa wanted to talk about, the vegetarian diet. So this was in a hotel. So somebody was made to run to the restaurant and get a piece of, a dish of a chicken dish, I think, was brought. And a subject was brought on the stage, and that subject we scanned, and then he just took the plate with that dish in his hand. And when we scanned, we saw that the energy had changed. Now, that is a lesson that I have never forgotten. You can keep hearing people saying, why you should be vegetarian and why you should not eat animals. But that example, when I saw how that person's energy had, just quickly, immediately shrunk, then that drove the message home to me. So that is why, experiencing things sometimes is very, very helpful. All right, let's go to the next sutra. Let's read the next two sutras together. In a crisis, be calm. Do not freak out. Think, what is the worst thing that can happen? If the possible consequence is of minimal significance, then have a cup of coffee and enjoy life. So the person who taught me pranic healing, his catchphrase was, "So you do this and then you enjoy life." So to me, it brings back memories of my first few classes of pranic healing. The storm will exhaust itself. After the storm, there will be calmness and peace. So when Master says, "Do not freak out," what he's saying is, I think what he's trying to tell us is, do not panic. Don't go into panic mode. So the difference between pranic and panic is only a small r. So remember the pranic way and not the panic way. So the first thing is to calm down. I think we have seen that in many sutras in the books that we have done. You must calm down. The first thing to do is to calm down. Then the second thing is to remember, is this really a mountain or am I making a mountain out of a molehill? ये समस्या वाकई इतनी बड़ी है या मैं उसको इतना बड़ा कर रहा हूं? Now do whatever you can to mitigate उस समस्या से डील करने के लिए, do whatever you have to, but you just keep in mind that panic or anxiety or fears, they do not help. So here, time to remember, let go. You do what you can, but after that you have to relax. And what does it mean, relax? Here Master says, have a cup of coffee. Now obviously not literally, maybe you enjoy coffee, maybe you don't. I would personally have a cup of tea rather than a cup of coffee. So that's what it is. And when master talks about the storm, storm, tufan, कि जो तूफान है वो थोड़ी देर में ठंडा हो जाएगा. The storm will die out. So there is this saying, which is a good saying to remember, that this will also pass. I think it says this too will pass. Like every situation in life, these are temporary. The good situations, unfortunately, and also the crises, they are also temporary. Another attitude to have is whatever is happening is God's will, and necessarily it is the best possible thing for me at this time. If it is difficult, it means I can build muscles, I can learn lessons. So there is a school of stoicism or stoic. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Stoic, being stoic, and so the school is called Stoicism. In Sanskrit, the words used are sanyam or vairagya. Where you say don't get too excited when things are good and don't get too depressed when things are not so good. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we indulge in inaction. You have to do whatever is required. You have to do whatever is feasible. But don't freak out. Just focus on what can be done. Okay, next page. When the Agnya Chakra is strong, an individual can be under tremendous stress and still smile. So, this tremendous stress is like the crisis of the previous sutra. Now, here, Master is telling us, a very important thing. He says, if your Agnya Chakra is strong, that is the key to an attitude, a stoic attitude, or an attitude of sanyam, vairagya. You see why? You have to understand, because the Agnya Chakra is how the spiritual will, you know, is expressed through us. How we express the higher or the spiritual will, the will of the soul. Now that is beyond, what in theosophy they call kama manas, the emotional body, the lower mental bodies. When we freak out, what is happening is that the kama manas, the emotional and lower mental bodies, they are going for a toss. That is where the storm is. So when your Agnya Chakra is strong, it is clear of these bodies, and through that the higher will or the spiritual will can come and dominate your personality, where it can say, well, what is the problem? It is not such a big problem, and this is how we will solve it. Okay, then there is a box item. When there is a crisis, you have to ask, what is the problem? Is the information validated? Is it exaggerated or distorted information? You see, because that also happens quite often. That will also happen very often, that you are getting into all sorts of panic about something that is not even real. Yeah. So it is important to validate the information. It is important to check. So study the options. Now, supposing the information is correct, now you study the options. My options, what in terms of my actions, what are the options? Ask yourself what can be done. What is within your control and what is beyond your control. This is where you become centered. This is where rooting helps. Staying rooted. You see, I'll just share this slide. I talked about this, I think, in the previous session. There is this important teaching that there are things that you can control, there are things you can influence, and there are things that are outside your control and influence. So these three circles, out of all the things in the world. So something I can control, for example, my behavior, my reaction, things I can influence, people around me, maybe I can influence them to some extent, my family members and so on. All right. Or, people who work with me and so on. So by discussion, by explaining to them, I can influence them. But there are things that are outside my control. For example, some election is going on. Now, supposing that party comes to power, supposing this person comes to power, I mean, can you do something about it? If you can't, then, that is where that cup of coffee will come in handy. There's no point in freaking out. So focus on things that you can do. What you can do, focus on that. Because many times, by staying focused here on things that we cannot control or we cannot influence, we miss out on things that we can actually do. जो हम कर सकते हैं वो तो करें. कई बार जो हम नहीं कर सकते उसमें इतने परेशान हो जाते हैं कि जो कर सकते हैं उसको भी भूल जाते हैं. Are you understanding? I hope this is making sense. And in terms of what you are going to do, we have to do the best that we can. I think I talked about this shlok the last time. I didn't have the slide. So here is the slide. Pay attention to the last line. Tasmadyo Gaya. Okay, I'm sorry, my pronunciation may be off. Yujyaswaha yogaha karmasu kaushalam. So apologies for the bad pronunciation, but really the meaning is therefore for you strive for. That means our job in this life is to aim for, strive for yoga. And what is yoga? Yoga is karmasu kaushalam, doing things properly, skillfully to the best that we can. In the most excellent way that we can. That is where our focus should be. Unfortunately, too often, by thinking about things we can do nothing about, we will even forego what we can do. जो हम कर सकते हैं उसको भी भूल जाते हैं, या करेंगे तो उसको बेमन से करेंगे. We will do it half-heartedly because we are so focused on things that we cannot control, we cannot influence. Is this making sense? I hope it is making sense. I think we'll end here today.